Hello once again, and welcome to Denton's Tales. Now, there's no Vikings or Norse gods in this one. Nothing historical at all. Hysterical, perhaps, but certainly not historical. Well, except in the sense that it did happen some years ago, rather more than I care to admit, when my hair was a slightly different colour to what it is now. You see, I trained as a classical stage actor. I mean, not that you'd ever think it. There was nothing theatrical about me, darling. No, not at all. Nothing like that. And I was ever so posh back then. Oh, yes, the voice, the diction, and all that, you see. I wasn't one of these modern method-acting mumblers who mutter under their breath, well, as if they're addressing the collar button, and you couldn't hear them beyond the front row of the stalls in the theatre. Of course, that doesn't really matter, I suppose, to movie or radio actors. I mean, in the movie, there's a very great boom hovering over one's head, following one around, so every indistinct muttered syllable is clearly heard. And, of course, in radio, one has a microphone, if you were instance, in front of one's face, so that the tiniest whisper can possibly boom out of the radio when they play it back. Now, I never did radio. Though, of course, it has one great advantage, I suppose, especially for the more, senile performers, shall we call them, who can't remember what they had for lunch, let alone the lines, since they don't have to remember lines, they just read them off a script. They also don't have to spend, of course, 2 or 3 weeks in rehearsals learning all the moves, nor do they have to put on costumes or bother with makeup. Talk about money for jam, I ask you. Talking about makeup. Now, I always did my own makeup. Well, I hated anybody messing around with my face, or, any other bits of me for that matter, but we won't talk about that. But yes, I was very, very proper, you see. I was extremely proper. People used to have a very bad idea of the theatre, you see. Like, all the men were poofs and all the women were tarts. But I was very respectable. The first play I was in, The Deep Blue Sea by Terence Rattigan, in which I played Sir William Collier, a middle-aged man. I was in my early 20s at the time, and Makeup Girl came along with all sorts of tubes and jars and spongy thingies, and she said, "Oh, I'll give you a face." I said, "You kick your little sock me ache, love. I'll do it myself, thank you very much." That's Polari for, keep your hands off my face. Polari was the theatrical language also used by gay people years ago, so that others wouldn't know what they were talking about. You see, you had to be very careful when you were gay back then. Oh, yes. Make the wrong gesture in the wrong place, and the old Bill will have you like that. The old Bill with the police, of course. So, you see, I always did it myself. And I was awfully good at it, too. Oh, yes, even if I do say so myself, which I do quite frequently. I remember I was once paraded in front of the cast of a play in the Abbey Theatre here in Dublin, at the first full dress rehearsal by the director, who told them, wait for it, who told them to look at me as an example of how to do makeup. Yes, how about that now? You see, this is the first time everyone was in costume and makeup. Of course, I was grinning like a Cheshire cat. I have absolutely no problem with the adulation of others. Well, it deserved it, you see. Yes, I absolutely deserved it. The director's remarks were meant mainly for one particular chap, it must be said, from the theatre's acting school, who had done his own makeup, and, he had a small, non-speaking part, but he was named in the play, even though he didn't actually say anything, which was J.M. Synge's The Well of the Saints. He was playing the Hunchback of Grianon. Now, the scene was that a wandering saint had cured a blind man. And this man, of course, has never seen any of his fellow villagers, well, obviously because he's blind, but he's looking around and he's recognizing some of them. Now he has his sight by the descriptions, he's heard of them over the years. He's sort of like, "Oh, you're Pat by the size of you. And you must be Mary because of your hair," and so on. He's going on like that. And he turns to the hunchback and he says, "And you're the Hunchback of Grianon," which I thought would be pretty obvious since the chap is the local answer to Quasimodo. At least that is what he was supposed to say. He didn't. You see, he'd rehearsed the role with his eyes shut up to the being cured bit. And that was how he intended to play the part. It made his movements more realistic. And, of course, this was the first dress rehearsal. So he hadn't seen the chap in all his made-up glory, if one could use that word, until that moment. Oh, he had, you see. Oh, yes. Oh, I'd seen him in the wings as we waited to go on. It was a sort of... Yeah. Ooh, yes. I wouldn't have wanted to meet him in a back alley on a dark night. The actor playing the now cured blind man, Eamon Kelly was his name, well, he swung around, you see, and he said, "Adore!" And he froze. Yes, he froze, struck dumb in mid-sentence by the spectacle that was facing him. You see, this young chap, well, he fancied himself as a makeup artist. Oh, yes, he really thought it was the bee's knees when it came to makeup. And presumably he wanted to make his small, non-speaking part stand out. Yes, he certainly succeeded in that, yes. Well, he was unmissable, you see. Yeah, he'd have stood out like a searchlight in a dark room if he had been hidden at the back of a crowd of 100 people. To begin with, he had added padding to the hump that the costume people had given him until, well, to be honest, he looked like Richard III and the Hunchback of Notre Dame had got together romantically and produced an offspring. The hump was huge. I mean, it was this great big, well, he looked more like a bloody camel. He had a bent nose. Oh, very good, very well done, I must say. Oh, yes, very well done. Using makeup, you see. It's a pale V-shaped line drawn down the nose and then dark shading to either side, so it looked like his proboscis was sideways. He had his face twisted, like, well, Muhammad Ali had used him for a punching bag. No, yeah, he stood out all right. The director, very calmly, I must say, asked him to, tone it down a bit. Yeah, just tone it down a bit, like lose all the special effects and reduce the hump, He was only supposed to have a scoliosis or something, not look like an escapee from the island of Dr. Moreau. After that came my moment of glory. Oh, yes, when the director told the cast, well, the acting school wannabes, I suppose, mostly, to take note of my artistic wonderfulness with the grease paint. Oh, of course, I was like a cat with cream. Well, I mean, I knew it was brilliant, of course. Now, everybody else did too, you see, which is very nice. As I said, I have no problem with adulation. Now, one part of makeup that I stayed away from like it had the plague was anything that had to be stuck on with glue. Oh, because you see, things that go on ever so nicely, or so you think, have a nasty habit of coming off again. I saw a wonderful example of that, with a false nose, constructed with nose putty, stuck on and very carefully shaped into a very striking aquiline proboscis, I would call it, a classic nose. The sort of nose would have been lovely for playing Julius Caesar, or something like that. That was a lovely nose, yes. The part was actually an elderly German doctor who'd been struck off for something or other and was living in a block of flats in London. I don't know why he needed this sort of Roman hooter, but anyway, that's what this chap put on. Like our friend who wanted to make himself stand out as the hunchback, this chap decided to add to his part. And a really big, impressive hooter seemed like a very good idea. Well, he'd also added a limp and a very strange German accent. One of those, "they have this und means of making you talk, you Schweinhund," sort of things, which wasn't mentioned anywhere in the script. Neither was, limping or anything else. But anyway, he was trying to make himself a little more prominent. He succeeded in doing that, possibly not quite in the way he had intended. But, you see, he was on stage, and he was drinking a glass of whiskey, actually red lemonade, watered down a bit, of course, when his magnificent hooter fell off. Yes, right into the glass with a very noticeable splash. We see that's what happens if you drop a big lump of putty into a liquid. And the acoustics of the theatre, well, they make it reverberate around the auditorium, you see. Everybody heard this splash. Good heavens. There was a different man standing there. Oh, a sudden transformation. It was incredible. One moment he could have rivaled a hornbill with his big beak-like nose. The next, well, he was his normal self with his Romanesque nose floating in the glass. Talk about Jekyll and Hyde, I ask you. Now, a golden rule of the stage is if anything goes pear-shaped, either ad-lib something that makes it look like the thing is actually part of the play, or at least you get a laugh with it. Well, if the show is a comedy, at least. I mean, don't try that in Hamlet or King Lear. No, very bad idea. Then, like, maybe the scenery falls down. You could say woodworm or termite if you're in America. Or you could say something like, man, I knew we shouldn't use that cheap builder. Yeah, look at that. Or, of course, you just ignore it and you carry on like nothing had happened. But you don't do what this nose-shedding chap did. Oh, no, not a long way. He gave the audience a replay of it. Yes, just in case I hadn't noticed it in the first place, which is somewhat unlikely. He tried to get the nose out of the glass, which required several attempts, because it was now wet and it was sort of wedged in the glass. But when he got it out, yes, pulled it out dripping wet and somewhat altered in appearance, one has to say, due to it being prized out of the glass. I mean, it is only made of soft putty. He tried to stick it back on. Oh, yes, smoothing it back over his own nose. Now, the reattachment of the errant proboscis was initially successful, insofar as it was back on his face, yes, but the artistic result of the reattachment process was far from what he desired. The lovely aristocratic hooter now resembled a mushroom, a wet, dripping mushroom. The play was very serious. Oh, very serious indeed. It dealt with topics like suicide, alcoholism, infidelity, and such likes. And a comic turn out of Saturday Night Live was really a bit out of place, I suppose. The nose, being wet and the glue obviously diluted, decided to do an encore. And it promptly fell off again, right back into the glass, with another very highly audible splash. The pathos, the drama, the human misery of suicide, the curse of alcoholism, the trauma of life that the author intended, well, that just packed its bags, Ducky, and left. I mean, that was gone. I suppose with that I should also now take my leave. Yes, bring down the curtain, bring up the house lights, and I shall say goodbye for now. Fare thee well. See, I'm not a bit theatrical, am I? You'd never know if I hadn't told you, would you? No, of course you wouldn't, dear.